They called me a beggar. Right there in front of my neighbors, my own son's wife laughed and said it like a joke. "You don't have to stand there like some beggar, Arthur," she'd said, waving her perfect manicure toward the door, while her friends snickered behind their glasses of Chardonnay. I stood still, holding the small box of tools I'd brought to fix the fence they'd asked me to repair. The box suddenly felt heavier, like it carried not just nails and wrenches, but every ounce of shame they wanted me to feel. My son David stood beside her, silent. His silence hurt more than her laughter. I smiled anyway. Not because I forgave them, but because I knew smiles last longer than outrage. They thought I'd just walk away quietly like an old man who doesn't know his place anymore. But they were wrong. The world was about to see who the real beggars were, and it wasn't me. 3 weeks earlier, I was still under the illusion that family loyalty meant something. I'd raised David to believe in hard work to fix things instead of replacing them. I used to run an auto repair shop in Tucson, 30 years of grease sweat and honest living. When I retired at 71, I thought my days of fixing broken things were behind me. Turns out I was wrong. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. "Dad, can we come by later? We need to talk." David had said, his voice hesitant. That phrase, "we need to talk," never brings good news. By the time he and Melissa arrived that afternoon, I'd already brewed coffee and tried to convince myself it was something small. Maybe they just wanted advice. They came dressed like they were heading to a photo shoot instead of visiting an old man's house. Melissa's perfume hit the air before she even spoke. David looked uncomfortable, his hands buried in his pockets. She got straight to the point. "Arthur, we've been working on a new family brand," she said. "A YouTube lifestyle channel, the perfect Henson home. Family values, renovation tips, positive vibes. You know, stuff people love these days." I nodded slowly, unsure where I fit into that sentence. David added, "We're filming a big segment this weekend about gratitude and generational wisdom. We thought it'd be nice if you joined us." It sounded harmless enough. Family gratitude wisdom. Those were my languages. "Sure," I said. "What do you need me to do?" Melissa smiled like a woman who'd just closed a deal. "Just be yourself, Dad. Maybe share something about hard work, old school discipline. It'll make a great contrast to the modern stuff." I didn't know then that contrast meant punchline. That Saturday, I drove to their house, big, white, and glassy, the kind of home that looks like it's allergic to fingerprints. I parked my old Ford truck in the driveway next to David's sleek new Tesla. The production crew was already there, lights, cameras, microphones, all of it. Melissa floated around in a cream dress, rehearsing lines in front of a ring light. David was adjusting his collar, pretending to help. "Dad," he said too loudly, like he was greeting a fan. "Glad you could make it?" Melissa gave me a once-over, her eyes stopping at my worn denim jacket. "Oh," she said with a half-smile, "that's authentic. Perfect." They sat me in a chair near the kitchen island, surrounded by spotless countertops and fake laughter. The director, a young guy with hair too shiny to trust, explained the setup. "Just talk naturally, Mr. Henson. We'll ask a few questions about family values." At first it was fine. They asked about my old shop, my thoughts on raising a family. I talked about work ethic, honesty, not taking shortcuts. Then Melissa leaned forward, smiling sweetly. "So, Arthur, how does it feel to retire with nothing left to do? Must be strange going from running a shop to, asking for help sometimes." I blinked. "I don't ask for help often," I said. "But there's no shame in needing family." She laughed, a sharp, rehearsed sound. "Of course not. Though some people might say that's kind of like begging." The crew chuckled. I looked at my son. He said nothing. That was the moment I realized I wasn't part of the show, I was the prop. The old man in flannel who made their perfect lives look shinier by comparison. When the cameras stopped rolling, I stood up slowly, heart pounding. Melissa thanked the crew, her voice all sugar again. Thanks, everyone. That's a wrap. I picked up my toolbox and turned to David. You didn't think that was funny, did you? He avoided my eyes. Dad, it's just content. People love authenticity. Authenticity, I repeated. You mean humiliation? Melissa stepped in, still smiling. Arthur, don't take it personally. It's entertainment. You'll be trending by tomorrow. I left without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice, Beggar. I'd spent my life working so my family would never go without. And somehow, I'd ended up being their punchline. 2 days later, the video went live. Teaching Grandpa Gratitude had over 500,000 views by morning. The thumbnail showed me holding a wrench with the caption, "When pride gets old." The comments were brutal. Poor guy doesn't even realize they're making fun of him. This is hard to watch. That's not family. That's exploitation. By the third day, it wasn't just strangers talking, it was local news. Tucson family goes viral for controversial gratitude video. Melissa doubled down online, claiming it was misunderstood satire. David said nothing. I stayed silent too, not because I was afraid, but because I knew how the internet worked. Outrage burns hot, but it burns out fast. Let them laugh. Let them post. But something unexpected happened. People began to dig. Someone found the property records, my name still on the deed of the house they lived in. Someone else found clips from my old shop's charity work videos of me fixing cars for free for veterans. And then the comments changed. Wait, that's his house. This man's a hero. They're the beggars. Karma's coming. The next morning, my neighbor Frank came by with a grin. You're famous, Art, he said, holding his phone. They're calling you the beggar dad who never begged. I smiled faintly. Funny. I didn't have to do anything. Frank nodded. Guess respect finds its way home, huh? That night I sat on my porch under the desert sky, the glow of my phone lighting up my hands. I scrolled through hundreds of messages, some angry, some kind, all from strangers who saw something in my story. One comment stuck with me. You didn't lose dignity, Mr. Henson. You reminded the rest of us what it looks like. I closed the phone and leaned back, listening to the crickets. The world thought they'd seen a beggar. What they were about to see was something else entirely. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry. I was ready. 3 days after that video blew up, I drove out to the edge of town to a place that used to be quiet. Now it was crowded with noise headlines, strangers' opinions, clips, comments. Everyone suddenly had an idea of who I was. Some called me a victim, others called me a fool. But none of them knew what it felt like to be laughed at, by your own blood. I parked my truck outside the hardware store, same one I'd been going to for 30 years. Inside, people whispered. One clerk, a kid barely old enough to shave, smiled shyly and said, Hey, Mr. Henson saw you online. That was messed up, sir. Hope you're okay. I nodded. Doing fine, son. Still breathing. That's what I told everyone who asked, doing fine. But fine was a lie. Fine was what men say when they're holding in something too deep for words. When I got home, the porch light was blinking. I climbed the 3 steps slowly, bones aching a little more than usual. There was an envelope wedged under the door with no return address. Inside was a printout of the video comments pages of them, some angry, some pitying. One note scribbled across the top in blue ink said, They can't hide behind filters forever. People are seeing the truth. No name, just that. The next morning, my neighbor Frank came by with 2 coffees. He didn't bring up the video right away. We just sat there in silence, watching the sun climb over the cactus line. Finally, he said, You ever think maybe this is their wake-up call? Sometimes people need to lose their reputation to find their soul. Maybe, I said. But I'm not waiting around for them to wake up. He looked at me a little surprised. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. Not yet. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning peace, the kind you get only after you stop expecting decency from people who've already shown you they don't have any. That afternoon, David called. His voice was tight defensive. Dad, this is getting out of control. You need to tell people you're not mad. They're twisting everything. I took a slow breath. You're worried about your image, not my feelings. That's not fair, he said. You made a joke out of me in front of the world, I replied. Fair isn't the word I'd use. He sighed. It wasn't supposed to go like that. Melissa thought it'd make people laugh. We didn't know it'd blow up like this. Maybe you should have thought before hitting upload. He was quiet for a long time, then muttered, I'll fix it. But people like him didn't fix things. They posted apologies, hired PR firms, changed hashtags. They didn't repair damage, they repainted it. 2 days later, Melissa posted a video titled, When Humor Hurts. She sat in her perfect kitchen, tears balanced neatly under her eyes, voice soft, fragile. We never meant to embarrass Arthur, she said. We love him deeply and are heartbroken that people misunderstood our intentions. The comments shredded her performance. You humiliated him, then cried about being misunderstood. This is peak influencer hypocrisy. By evening, their sponsorships were dropping faster than the views. I didn't celebrate. I just watched it unfold, calm as still water. Karma was faster than I thought. But then the backlash turned darker. Reporters started showing up near my property, snapping photos of my mailbox. One article called me the quiet father who sparked a family downfall. I didn't like that title. It made it sound like I'd planned the whole thing. Frank drove over one evening with a grocery bag and said, You need to stay low for a while. People are crazy about this stuff. You might get all kinds of visitors. Let them come, I said. I'm done hiding. That night I sat on the porch and opened my laptop for the first time in months. I read every message strangers had sent. One from Oregon said, My daughter stopped talking to me 5 years ago. Seeing you handle that humiliation with grace gave me hope. Another from Michigan. Your silence was louder than their laughter. Somehow complete strangers were giving me back what my family had taken dignity. And then came the email that changed everything. Subject: You don't know me, but I know who posted the video. From Truth Tracker at 85. Message: I used to work for them. You deserve to know the real story. They planned it, scripted it, and sold it. I have proof. I stared at the screen for a long time. The address traced back to a coffee shop in Phoenix. Attached was a short clip, raw footage before edits. Melissa's voice came through sharp and irritated. Okay, cut there. Arthur's being too serious. Let's make him repeat it slower. It's funnier that way. Then David's voice. Yeah, make sure we get his face when she says beggar. That'll kill on TikTok. My stomach twisted. That single clip erased every excuse they'd tried to give me. They hadn't slipped up. They'd planned it. Every frame, every cruel word deliberate. For the first time, I felt something stronger than hurt clarity. The next day, I met Truth Tracker 85 at a diner off Highway 10. He turned out to be a young guy named Jake Morales, barely 30, thin and nervous, but with sharp eyes. I worked freelance on their channel, he said. Quit after that shoot. Couldn't stomach it. They told us to cut out parts that made them look bad, but I kept a backup drive. I thought you might want to see it. He slid a USB across the table. Everything's on there. They're planning emails. the full footage, the sponsorship contracts tied to that gratitude video. I looked at him carefully. Why help me? He shrugged. Because people like you shouldn't be the joke. And because I've seen too many good folks get chewed up by fake families online. For a long moment, I just looked at the drive in my hand. Proof. Not gossip, not speculation, proof. Thank you, I said quietly. He smiled. You don't need to thank me. Just make it count. On the drive home, the sun was setting behind the desert hills, turning the sky the color of rust and fire. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and let the wind hit my face. I thought about every year I'd spent teaching David the difference between right and easy. He'd chosen easy every time. Back home, I plugged the drive into my laptop. There they were, dozens of files. Emails about profit projections, marketing tie-ins. Even a document titled Emotional Angles, using Arthur's reactions. I didn't get angry. I didn't throw the computer or shout into the night. I simply copied the files into a folder labeled Truth. Then I sat back and smiled for the first time in weeks. They'd turned me into content. Now I had the evidence to turn their lies into their own undoing. Justice, I thought, isn't loud. It's patient. And sometimes it's holding a USB drive full of karma. I didn't sleep that night. The little green light from my laptop blinked on and off like it was breathing beside me. The USB drive sat on the desk next to a cup of cold coffee. Every time I looked at it, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: control. For weeks, I'd been the punchline in someone else's story. Now finally the story was mine again. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Ellen Porter, my old lawyer and friend, from the days when I ran my repair shop. She used to handle contracts, property papers, all the boring things I'd never thought would matter much in retirement. Turns out they mattered more than ever. When she picked up, her voice was sharp and warm at once. Arthur Henson. Haven't heard that name since you sold the shop. You all right? I'm fine, Ellen, I said. Just need a little advice about a family matter. Family matters never stay little, she said. What's going on? I told her everything. The loan, the humiliation, the video, the evidence Jake had given me. I didn't spare the details. I could hear her typing as I spoke, every click sounding like a nail sealing something shut. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. Arthur, that's not just disrespect. That's fraud, and if those funds were misused under a written agreement, you've got leverage. I'm not looking to ruin them, I said quietly. I just want the truth to stop living in their favor. Ellen's voice softened. Then we'll start by protecting what's yours. Bring me everything you have. We'll do this the right way. I drove to her office that afternoon, the desert wind tugging at the corners of my mind. I'd always believed in fixing things with my hands. But this time, it would take paperwork, not wrenches. Her office hadn't changed much: stacks of files, a coffee mug that said, "Justice is decaf," and that same steady gaze that could cut through any excuse. I laid the folder on her desk. This is everything Jake found. Emails, bank transfers, contracts, footage. She flipped through the pages, her eyebrows climbing. You're telling me they filmed this humiliation while using your loan money to fund their brand Jesus Arthur? They might have violated half a dozen financial codes. I nodded. They thought I'd never notice. Or if I did, I wouldn't care enough to do anything. Well, she said, closing the file, they guessed wrong. When I left her office, I didn't feel anger or triumph, just clarity. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm when you know exactly where the lightning will strike. That evening, I called Jake. How sure are you about these files? 100%, he said. I've double-checked the metadata. Everything traces back to their accounts. It's airtight. Good, I said. Because it's time the world saw the real version of that family video. Arthur, he said carefully, if you're thinking of uploading, I'm not. I cut him off. They use the internet to humiliate me. I'll use the truth to undo them. But not with noise, with proof. The next morning, Ellen called again. Arthur, I reviewed your old loan agreement. You're listed as the lien holder. If they default or misuse the funds, you have the right to claim repayment or initiate foreclosure on the property. I let the words sink in. Foreclosure. It sounded heavy, final. Ellen, I said, I'm not sure I can do that to my own son. She paused. Arthur, your son already did this to himself. You're just giving the consequences a name. That day, I printed everything: contracts, bank records, screenshots. I bought a new binder and labeled it in thick black ink. Evidence. Henson Family Accountability. I slid the USB into its pocket at the back and locked it in my cabinet. It felt like closing a chapter I never meant to write. Frank stopped by later with a six-pack. He sat on the porch, cracking one open. You look like a man about to make a move, he said. Something like that, I replied. He sipped his beer, watching the horizon. You sure you want to go down that road? Once you do, there's no walking it back. I know, I said. But sometimes walking away isn't peace. It's surrender. He nodded slowly. Then don't half-ass it, old man. Do it right. That night, I opened my laptop again and typed out a short message on Reddit under my username, YouOldMechanic71. They called me a beggar. I stayed silent. But silence doesn't erase truth. Sometimes family isn't blood. It's the people who remind you that dignity doesn't expire. The post wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my name from the noise. Within hours, the comments poured in. This man is class personified. Reminds me of my dad. Real men don't yell, they act. Please update us when karma hits. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. 2 days later, Ellen called with an update. Arthur, I sent the preliminary inquiry to the state attorney's office. We're opening a quiet review of their financial activity. Will they know? I asked. Eventually, she said. But by then you'll be miles ahead. For the first time since this began, I exhaled fully. There was no need for public screaming matches, no viral call-outs, just methodical, lawful consequences. That evening, I walked out to my backyard, the desert air cool and clean. I sat in my old folding chair, watching the sunset paint the horizon gold. The cicadas were singing again, the same song I'd heard every summer of my life. I pulled out my notebook and wrote a single line. Revenge doesn't need rage, it just needs order. As the light faded, I thought about David as a boy handing me wrenches at the shop, asking how engines worked. Back then, he wanted to fix things. Somewhere along the way, he decided pretending to be perfect was easier than being honest. I walked inside, and opened the binder again. The papers smelled faintly of toner and justice. On the first page, I wrote a note in pen. If I'm ever gone, this is the record of what was done. Not out of hate, but out of respect for truth. The sound of my old clock filled the room, steady, deliberate, like a heartbeat that refused to rush. By the time I went to bed, I wasn't tired. I felt sharpened, focused. The kind of calm you feel when you've already decided to fight and you know exactly how. Tomorrow, I'd meet Ellen again. And this time, we wouldn't be talking about advice. We'd be talking about action. Some people chase revenge for satisfaction. I wasn't chasing anything. I was building something stronger: justice with dignity. And if karma needed an engineer, I was ready to draw the blueprints. The letter went out on a Monday morning. Ellen emailed me a copy before sending it to David and Melissa's address. 3 pages of legal precision, no emotion, just facts. A demand for repayment of the $80,000 due within 30 days, or the lien on their house, would be enforced. I read it twice, sipping my coffee. Every line was sharp and clean, like a blade forged by truth. Ellen called an hour later. "It's done," she said. "Certified delivery. They'll get it by Wednesday." I looked out at the desert through my kitchen window. Then, I suppose the silence won't last much longer. "Arthur," she said carefully, "when they react, and they will don't engage in anger. Everything they say from now on can be used against them. Let the paperwork talk." "I've spent my life letting others talk for me," I replied. "I think the paperwork can take a turn." By Wednesday afternoon, the phone started ringing. I didn't answer. By evening, I had 6 missed calls from David and 2 voicemails from Melissa. The third voicemail was different. It started calm, ended in panic. "Dad, please, what's this letter? You can't be serious. This will ruin us. You can't do this to your family." Family. The word hit me like static, something that used to mean warmth, but now just made noise. I waited until morning before calling back. When he answered, I could hear the chaos in his breathing. "Dad, thank God. We need to talk." "There's nothing to discuss," I said evenly. "You borrowed money under a legal agreement. You misused it. Now you'll make it right." "It wasn't misuse," he shouted. "We reinvested it into the business marketing equipment." "You mean the cameras, the luxury kitchen sets, the BMW parked in your driveway?" He paused. "You've been digging I didn't have to dig. The truth doesn't bury itself that deep." "Dad, please," he said, his voice cracking. "You're making a mistake. You'll destroy everything we've built." I took a breath, slow and steady. "No, David. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just reminding you who built it first." He hung up. I sat back in my chair, the old wood creaking under me. There was no joy in it, just quiet resolve. The kind that comes when you've stopped hoping for decency and started demanding accountability. 2 days later, Melissa called. Her tone was the opposite of David's soft, sweet practiced. "Arthur, hi. I just wanted to reach out personally. We've had such a stressful week, and I know this letter must be hard for you too." "Hard," I said. "It's not hard. It's just overdue." She laughed lightly, like we were sharing a joke. "You've always been so proud, Arthur. That's one of the things I admire about you. But don't you think this is a little unnecessary? I mean, lawyers' liens. It's family, not business." "That's exactly the problem," I said. "You treated it like business when you asked for money. Now you want it to be family when it's time to pay it back." Her voice sharpened. "You think this makes you noble people online are already turning on you. They think you're greedy, that you can't let things go." "I didn't ask for followers," I said calmly. "You did." There was a long silence, then she hissed, "You'll regret this." "No," I said. "You will. The difference is, I'll still have a roof over my head when you do." She hung up without another word. Ellen called later that afternoon. "They've officially received the letter. My guess, they'll ignore it until the last possible second. It's what most guilty people do." I nodded. Then we wait. Waiting wasn't new to me. I'd waited through 30 years of small business taxes, slow seasons, and broken promises. Waiting was a skill, and I had mastered it. The internet, though, wasn't waiting. By the end of the week, someone had leaked part of the legal notice. I don't know who it might have been, a reporter or one of Melissa's PR contacts trying to spin the story. Either way, the headline spread fast. Viral family faces lawsuit from patriarch. Frank came by again with the article pulled up on his phone. "They're calling you ruthless, Art." I shrugged. "Funny. I used to be invisible." He chuckled. Guess being the quiet guy finally paid off. Maybe, I said. But quiet only matters if it's backed by truth. The following week, their empire started crumbling. Sponsors withdrew. Their perfect family channel lost 2/3 of its subscribers. A few brave fans commented things like, maybe Grandpa wasn't the problem after all. David called again on a Saturday evening. "Dad, listen," he said, his tone lower, quieter. "We can fix this. Just withdraw the lien. We'll pay you back as soon as we recover." "You had recovery time," I said. "You spent it filming gratitude speeches. Do you want me to lose my home?" "Your home," I repeated. "I still own it, David. Legally. Remember the deed?" Silence. Then a bitter laugh. "You really planned this, didn't you? You've been waiting to teach me a lesson. I never wanted to teach you anything this way," I said. "But you left me no choice." His voice broke. "You're ruining me." "No," I said softly. "I'm saving you from thinking you could get away with it." He hung up again. This time he didn't call back. Days turned into a quiet kind of storm. Melissa deleted her social media accounts. Their company website vanished overnight. Ellen texted, they missed the first payment. "We're moving forward with property action." I met Ellen in her office the next morning. She had a new folder ready, short, neat, devastating. "This," she said, "is a formal notice of foreclosure initiation. Once filed, they'll have 30 more days to respond. After that, it's yours." I looked at the signature line. My name looked strange there, strong final. I signed anyway. "Do it," I said. When I got home, I placed the pen next to the binder labeled Evidence, Henson Family Accountability. The two looked good together, decision and proof side by side. Frank stopped by that night. "You did it, yeah?" I said quietly. "Feels less like winning and more like finishing a job I never wanted." He cracked open a beer and handed it to me. "Still, that's one hell of a job, Art." We sat in silence, watching the desert darken. After he left, I went inside, poured another coffee, and opened my notebook. I wrote they mistook kindness for weakness. Turns out they were both just opportunities to choose right or wrong. I closed the notebook and stared at the stack of legal documents on the table. Justice didn't feel loud or heroic. It felt quiet, steady, and earned. They once called me a beggar. But beggars don't hold the deed to the house their children live in. And tomorrow, they'd be reminded of exactly that. The notice was filed on a Tuesday morning. Ellen sent me a copy of the court stamp, a small rectangle of ink that changed everything. It was official now. 30 days to pay, or the house would be repossessed. I stared at the document in my hands for a long time. I didn't feel proud or vindicated, just tired. It's strange how justice, when it finally arrives, can feel as heavy as the injustice that led to it. By the end of that week, the ripple effects had started. David's company, Solar Edge Dynamics, lost its biggest contract after the buyer read about the legal dispute online. Melissa's brand deals evaporated overnight. Their public image, once polished and spotless, was cracking in real time. I didn't post a thing. I didn't need to. The world was watching them destroy themselves. Karma had gone digital, and I was just the witness. That Friday night, while I was fixing the hinge on my shed, headlights swept across the driveway. I wiped my hands on a rag, just as David's Tesla rolled to a stop. He climbed out slowly, wearing the same leather jacket I'd bought him years ago. He looked smaller in it now. Melissa stayed in the car, her face lit by the dashboard glow mascara streaked. "Dad," David said, walking up the path, "we need to talk." "I thought we already did," I said, not unkindly. He glanced back at the car, then lowered his voice. "Please, just listen." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Go ahead." He exhaled sharply. We can't lose the house. The kids, they don't understand what's happening. They think you hate us. I don't hate you, I said. But I'm done protecting you from what you've done. Mom would have never done this, he said. I met his eyes. Your mother never would have stolen from me either. He looked away, jaw tightening. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You borrowed my trust and spent it on your image. Melissa opened the car door, then stepping out carefully in heels too high for gravel. Arthur, please, she said, voice trembling. This has gone too far. You've made your point. Can't we just stop this before it gets uglier? I looked at her. Ugly started when you called me a beggar on camera. She flinched. For the first time, her confident posture faltered. David stepped closer. We'll pay you back. We just need time. You've had time, I said quietly. 8 months of it. Dad, we're your family. That word doesn't mean what you think it means anymore. He stared at me, searching for a trace of weakness. I didn't give him one. After a moment, he shook his head. Fine, he said bitterly. You win. There's no winning here, I said. Only consequences. They left without another word. The next morning, Ellen called. You should know the bank reached out. They're preparing the property transition paperwork. It's moving fast. Good, I said. The sooner the better. She hesitated. Arthur, are you ready for what happens after that? I've been ready since the day they turned me into content. For the next 2 weeks, the story refused to die. Every gossip site, every Reddit thread, every talk show seemed to mention the Beggar Dad case. Someone even made a parody video using clips from the original editing in my calm expressions with quotes like, "Dignity doesn't need followers." It got millions of views. Meanwhile, David and Melissa tried to push a new narrative. Melissa posted one final statement on her social media: family is complicated. We all make mistakes. Please stop attacking us. It didn't work. The comments filled with fire. You mocked your father and called him a beggar. Now you're crying karma's trending honey. Your dad's the definition of class. You're the definition of fake. Every day the view count on their apology dropped while the sympathy for me rose. But I didn't read the comments for revenge. I read them for confirmation that decency still existed somewhere in the world. One afternoon, while I was sitting on the porch, Frank pulled up in his old Chevy. He handed me a newspaper. The headline read, "Influencer couple under investigation for misuse of funds." Looks like Ellen's letter got attention, Frank said, lowering himself into the chair beside me. They wanted attention, I said. Now they've got the kind they can't control. Frank nodded. Feels poetic, feels sad, I said. Poetry shouldn't come from betrayal. We sat there for a long time, not talking much, just listening to the wind hum across the desert. The following Monday, Ellen called again. Arthur, they missed the repayment deadline. The lien enforcement will go through. You'll legally own the house within the month. I closed my eyes. So that's it then. That's it, she said gently. You did everything by the book. I thanked her and hung up. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like closing a door you'd built with your own hands, knowing you'll never walk through it again. That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. David as a boy standing next to me at the garage, holding a wrench too big for his hands. Melissa at their wedding, eyes bright with ambition. Back then, none of us knew what greed looked like. It wasn't money, it was hunger for admiration. A few days later, Ellen texted again. It's official. The house title has been transferred. I didn't drive there immediately. I waited until evening when the sun was low and the world was quiet. When I finally pulled up, the sight was almost surreal. The same house where they'd laughed at me, where they'd called me a beggar, now stood hollow. Curtains drawn lights off a foreclosure notice taped to the glass. I walked up the driveway slowly, each step crunching the gravel that used to be my pride and their vanity. A delivery flyer was still wedged in the mailbox, curling at the edges. I peeled it out and glanced through the window. Inside, I could see boxes, furniture covered in sheets, a ghost of the life they'd flaunted online. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Justice wasn't about taking back what was mine. It was about letting go of what they'd stolen. As I turned to leave, a neighbor across the street waved. "Mr. Henson, right?" she called. "I saw everything online. Good for you. They treated you terribly." I smiled politely. "It's not about good or bad," I said. "It's about balance." When I got home, the porch light flickered again. I replaced the bulb, the small act grounding me in something real, something mine. Then I sat down with my coffee and watched the sky fade into darkness. I thought about everything that had happened. The insults, the exposure, the legal fight, and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Just free. They once called me a beggar. But beggars don't own houses or peace or silence. And that silence finally belonged to me. The night after the house officially became mine, I couldn't sleep. The air was heavy with that strange quiet that only follows endings. I sat on the porch, the legal papers folded neatly beside a cup of black coffee. The desert wind carried the scent of dust and rain, and for the first time in months, I felt no weight on my shoulders. It was over, at least on paper. But I knew better than to believe endings were ever that clean. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you've won? But this isn't over." No name, no context. Just that. I stared at the screen for a long minute before turning it off. I'd lived long enough to know that when people lose control, they lash out. And David was running out of control to lose. The next morning, Frank stopped by with breakfast burritos and a grin. "You see the news?" he asked, unwrapping his food. "No," I said. "I stopped watching. You might want to make an exception." He handed me his phone. On the screen was a headline, "Viral Family Under Fraud Investigation After Loan Dispute." I scrolled down and read the article. It mentioned misuse of funds, false advertising, unpaid debts. My name was in there too, but not as a villain this time. The father at the center of the viral Beggar Dad video has legally reclaimed ownership of his son's property. Frank leaned back in his chair. "Looks like karma got a front-page spread." I shook my head. Karma doesn't need headlines. It just needs time. Still, I couldn't deny the small flicker of satisfaction that came with reading it. Not joy, never joy. Just the steady calm of seeing the truth finally standing on its own 2 feet. By afternoon, the calls started again. Unknown numbers. Reporters, bloggers, podcasters, all wanting a comment. I ignored every one. But then Ellen called. "Arthur, a journalist from the Herald Tribune, reached out to me directly," she said. "They're running a feature on financial elder abuse and want to include your case." "I'm not interested in being anyone's headline," I told her. "I know. But you could help others. You've got evidence, credibility, and people's attention. You could turn this into something useful." I looked out at the yard where my tools hung neatly on the wall, organized, predictable, unlike life. "Let me think about it," I said. That evening, while I was cleaning up after dinner, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I froze. Melissa stood there, sunglasses hiding half her face, a nervous smile twitching at her lips. "Arthur," she said softly, "can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her designer purse, like it was the last piece of dignity she had left. You look tired, I said. She gave a small laugh that cracked halfway through. You could say that. The internet's relentless. We've lost everything. Sponsors, jobs, friends. Not respect, I said. You never had that to lose. Her smile faded. You really hate me, don't you? I shook my head. No. Hate takes energy. I've spent enough of mine already. She leaned forward. David's falling apart. He's drinking again. The kids keep asking why you took the house. They think you wanted revenge. I wanted accountability, I said. But if you need to call it revenge to sleep at night, go ahead. Her eyes glistened. Can't you just let this go? For the kids, I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the fading light. Letting it go is what got us here. Every time I let something slide, you two pushed further. You don't get to burn down the bridge and then complain about the river. She wiped her eyes. You sound just like those people online. Then maybe for once the internet's right. She rose, gathering her bag. You'll regret this, she said quietly. No, I said. You will. I just hope it doesn't take losing your children to see it. When she left, I sat down exhausted, but strangely peaceful. The house felt cleaner somehow, like the air had shifted. Later that night, I opened my laptop to check my email. Among the spam and junk, one message caught my eye. The subject line read, "Thank you for standing up." It was from a woman in Ohio. Mr. Henson, my daughter, and her husband took advantage of me financially last year. I watched your story unfold and felt less alone. You reminded me that we still have power, even when people call us weak. Thank you. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair. Maybe Ellen was right. Maybe this could help more than just me. The next morning I called her. Set up the interview, I said. But I'm not giving them a sob story. I'm giving them a lesson. She laughed softly. That's exactly what they want, Arthur. 2 days later, I met the reporter at a cafe downtown. She was young, polite, and nervous to be sitting across from the man the internet had turned into a symbol. Mr. Henson, she began, how does it feel to see your family's downfall become a global story? I stirred my coffee. It's not a downfall, I said. It's a correction. She blinked. A correction, life has a way of balancing the scales. You can't cheat truth forever. We talked for an hour. I didn't give her details about my son or Melissa, just the lessons about contracts, trust, and knowing when to stop being quiet. When we finished, she shook my hand and said, "Thank you. People need to hear this." That night, the article went live. The headline read, "The Man Who Chose Dignity Over Silence." The piece went viral. Thousands of comments poured in. This man's strength gives me hope. He didn't destroy his family. They destroyed themselves. Respect isn't owed, it's earned. For the first time, my story wasn't twisted by someone else's narrative. It was mine. But the piece didn't last long. A few days later, Ellen called again, her voice tight. Arthur, brace yourself. The Hensons just filed a counterclaim. For what they're accusing you of emotional distress and slander. They say your actions, directly or indirectly, caused their reputational and financial ruin. I couldn't help but laugh. They ruined themselves, Ellen. I didn't upload a single thing. I know, she said. But we'll have to prove it. Good, I said. Because proof is all I have left, and it's enough. After the call, I sat by the window, watching lightning dance far out over the desert. It was beautiful in a way only storms can be, terrible, loud, cleansing. I smiled faintly and whispered to myself, let it rain. They called me a beggar once. Now they were the ones begging the court to save them. And just as patient as ever, was just getting started. The email came at dawn, buried between a dozen junk messages, and a newsletter I never remembered subscribing to. The sender's name was familiar Truth Tracker 85, Jake. The subject line read, "We need to talk. You deserve to know who leaked that video." I stared at the screen for a long minute before opening it. "Mr. Henson, I know you didn't want the fame, but you should know what really happened. The footage wasn't leaked by accident. Someone inside their team wanted the truth out. Call me." He left a number. I hesitated, then dialed. Jake answered on the second ring. "Arthur?" He said, his voice low and cautious. "I've got something you need to see." "More evidence?" I asked. "Not exactly. Someone's been digging deeper into you, your shop, your finances. I think David hired a PR firm to spin this whole thing back around." I sighed. "They never stop trying to polish the ashes, do they?" He chuckled. "No, sir. But this time they made a mistake." Jake explained that an ex-employee from Melissa's production team had reached out to him. She'd recorded a call where Melissa admitted she planned the beggar joke ahead of time to make their video emotional. Jake said she called it the humility hook. That's what they used to call it in their content strategy meetings. I gritted my teeth. "Humility hook," I repeated quietly. "Sounds about right. Make the old man look small so the audience feels big." Jake hesitated. "Arthur, with your permission, I want to upload this clip anonymously. Reddit's been waiting for your side of the story. The truth deserves sunlight." I thought about it. I'd spent months being careful not reacting, not feeding the fire. But sometimes sunlight doesn't burn. Sometimes it disinfects. "Do it," I said. "But don't post it as revenge. Post it as record." 2 hours later, it was everywhere. A 45-second clip of Melissa talking to her assistant. "Oh, he'll look perfect next to that old toolbox. Make sure the lighting's harsh. It makes him look more vulnerable. The beggar angle will melt hearts." The internet did the rest. Within hours, Reddit exploded. "Argue Our Family Fails" was flooded with comments. She scripted the humiliation that's pure evil. Beggar Dad deserves an apology in gold. She didn't just humiliate him, she commodified him. By evening, the clip hit Twitter, then YouTube. News outlets picked it up. Proof emerges, viral family faked, Beggar Dad scene. I watched it unfold in silence, the glow from my laptop painting the room pale blue. Frank dropped by that night, waving his phone. "Art, you're blowing up again. The internet's eating her alive." "I didn't want that," I said. He sat down beside me. "No, but maybe it's what they need. Sometimes pain is the only teacher left." The next morning, my inbox was overflowing. Journalists, activists, people thanking me. One stood out, a young woman from Vermont who wrote, "My parents cut me off when I refused to appear in their wholesome family vlogs. You gave me the courage to walk away." I replied, "You didn't walk away. You walked toward peace." For the first time, I realized the story wasn't just about me anymore. It had grown beyond our family. It was a mirror for thousands who'd been turned into props in their own lives. Later that day, David called. I didn't answer at first, but when the phone rang again, I picked up. "Dad," he said, voice hoarse, "did you see the video I did? It's ruining us. Sponsors are gone. Melissa's getting death threats. Please do something." "I already did," I said. "I told the truth." "You don't understand," he pleaded. "The kids are scared. Reporters are outside the house." I stayed silent. "Dad, please tell people to stop. You can end this." "No, son," I said quietly. "You can. All it takes is admitting what you did." He didn't answer. I heard his breath catch, then the call dropped. By evening, Jake texted again, "It's gone global. Trending #1. #BeggarDadTruth." I opened Reddit and sure enough, my story was everywhere. Screenshots, timelines, even fan art. Someone had drawn me sitting on a porch, smiling under the words, "Dignity doesn't age." I laughed softly. The world had a strange way of finding poetry in pain. That night I got another message, this time from a podcast host named Laura King. "Mr. Henson, your story has inspired millions. Would you consider coming on air, not to talk about revenge, just truth?" I replied, "I'll think about it." I didn't want fame, I just wanted closure. But closure, it seemed, wasn't a door you closed yourself. It was the sound of the world finally closing it for you. The following week, Ellen called with updates. "The counterclaim's been withdrawn," she said. "They're out of funds. And between the fraud case and public backlash, their chances of recovery are zero." "I'm not celebrating," I said, "but I won't mourn it either." She sighed. "You're a better man than most, Arthur. A lot of people would have rubbed it in." "Rub what in?" I said. "They burned their own bridge. I just watched it fall." After we hung up, I sat in the living room staring at an old photo, David, maybe 6 years old, sitting in my lap at the garage, grease on both our faces, laughing. That boy had wanted to build things. The man he became had only wanted to be seen. The next day, a box arrived at my doorstep. No return label, just my name. Inside was a single note written in David's handwriting. "I'm sorry for everything." Underneath, a small silver wrench, the same one I gave him when he was 12. I turned it over in my hand, felt the cold metal warm slowly against my skin. For the first time in a long time, I let myself exhale. That night, I logged into Reddit again and wrote one last post. I'm not the beggar they said I was. But even beggars can teach the rich what value means. To everyone who found strength in this story, thank you. Dignity isn't something you lose, it's something you stop giving away. The post exploded overnight, tens of thousands of upvotes, thousands of comments. But I didn't stick around to read them. I closed the laptop, stepped outside, and watched the desert stars stretch endlessly across the sky. The air was cool, silent, alive. They had turned my life into a lesson for views. Now, the lesson was theirs to learn. And me, I was done teaching. I was finally free. I didn't want to see another article, another headline, or another comment thread. But Ellen kept sending updates. "You should know what's being said about you," she told me. I didn't read most of them, but one headline caught my eye. "The calm engineer, the man who redefined revenge." I didn't care much for the title, but I liked the sound of calm. I'd spent enough of my life being quiet for the wrong reasons. Now finally, that calm had weight. Ellen called early one morning. "Arthur, I met with the auditors," she said. "The deeper they dig, the worse it looks for David's company. Fraud, misrepresentation, maybe even tax evasion." I stared at the coffee dripping into the pot. "Then dig deeper," I said. She hesitated. "You sure you want this to go that far? It'll destroy whatever's left of his reputation." I leaned against the counter. His reputation was built on a lie. If the truth destroys it, that's not my fault. There was a long pause before she said softly, "Then we move forward." Later that day, I met her downtown at her office. She had 3 folders laid out on the desk, each labeled in neat black print: loan records, expense reports, personal accounts. She pushed one toward me. "These are the documents your son submitted when he applied for business financing. He listed your funds as capital investment, not a loan. That's illegal unless you signed off on it." "I didn't," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why we can act." I flipped through the pages. Luxury items, flights, branded furniture, all charged under business expenses, And right there at the bottom, a payment of $20,000 to Melissa Media LLC. They used my money to fund her image, I muttered. He didn't even bother hiding it. Ellen folded her hands. Arthur, if you want justice, now's the time. We can freeze their assets, start legal proceedings, and hold them accountable. Quietly, cleanly. Quietly, I said. I like that word. That afternoon, I called Jake. Remember those files you gave me? Of course, he said. Still got backups. I need your help again. This time, not for the internet, for the law. Jake whistled. Guess the old man's done playing nice. I was never playing, I said. Within a few days, Jake had compiled everything. Metadata timestamps, financial trails, and handed it all over to Ellen's team. It was enough to start an investigation. While the paperwork moved through the system, I kept my hands busy. Fixed the porch railing, tuned up my old truck, repaired a neighbor's lawnmower just because it gave me something to do. It's easier to wait when you're building something, even if it's small. A week later, Ellen called. Arthur, we've filed the case. You'll get a court notice soon. I've also requested a lien activation on the remaining assets of Solar Edge Dynamics. What happens next? I asked. They'll be notified by certified mail. Then the system does its job. I smiled faintly. Good. I trust the system more than I trust apologies. The following days were quiet. Too quiet. Until one evening when the phone rang, it was David. Dad, he said, his voice low. We got a letter from your lawyer. What the hell are you doing? Protecting what's mine, I said simply. You're suing your own family. I'm holding them accountable, I corrected. There's a difference. He groaned, frustrated. You think this makes you a hero? People online already see you as some saint. But when they find out what you've done, how vindictive you really are, they'll turn on you. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not looking for an audience. I've already had one. You're going to ruin us, he said, his words shaking. You did that yourself, I replied. I'm just finishing the paperwork. He hung up. I sat there for a long while after the call ended, the quiet ringing louder than the phone ever had. That night, Frank came by with 2 beers. You look like you've been through a war, he said, dropping into the chair beside me. Feels like one, I said. He took a sip. You think you'll win? I looked out at the horizon, the desert sun bleeding red into the clouds. Winning's not the point. Balance is. Frank nodded slowly. You always were the patient one. Patience, I thought, isn't peace. It's pressure waiting for the right release. A week later, Ellen called again. Arthur, I just came from a meeting with the Financial Review Board. It's worse than we thought. Melissa's been transferring money out of state to a separate account under a fake business name. Illegal, I asked. Extremely. Then file it. Already did, she said. Arthur, you should know once this hits the records, it'll go public. Reporters, investors, everyone will see. Let them, I said. They built a brand on exposure. Let them live with it. When the story broke, it was everywhere. Henson family under financial investigation after viral scandal. Melissa's smiling face was replaced by stills from the leaked video. David's name was mentioned alongside words like embezzlement and breach of trust. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I just sat in my workshop fixing an old carburetor, the smell of oil and metal steadying me. The radio buzzed softly in the background. News anchors dissecting the case like it was entertainment. Jake texted me later that night. You did it, Arthur? They're finished, I replied. No. The truth did it. A few days after a small envelope arrived at my door, inside was a note from Ellen. They defaulted. The accounts are frozen. You're entitled to recovery of funds and property. Underneath the note, she'd clipped a photocopy of the court's decision, case closed in favor of the plaintiff. I placed it next to the binder marked Evidence. Henson Family Accountability. For a long time, I just stood there staring at it. Not proud, not vengeful, just still. Outside, the wind rattled the trees, carrying a quiet hum through the yard. I poured myself a coffee and stepped onto the porch. The night was clear, stars sharp against the sky. I thought about David, about Melissa, about all the noise they'd made, trying to seem perfect. Now, there was nothing but silence. Justice, I realized, doesn't roar. It whispers. And if you listen long enough, you can hear it settling everything into place. The first sign that things were truly over came from an unexpected place, an apology email from Melissa's sister Claire. It arrived late on a Sunday night, buried under receipts and junk mail. Mr. Henson, I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted to tell you something. I saw what my sister and David did to you up close. I was part of the filming crew for that first Beggar Dad video. I tried to talk them out of it. They laughed. They said, "It's just content, no one will care." But people did care. You deserve to know that not everyone in this family agreed with what they did. I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't reply. There are some things an apology can't fix, no matter how sincere it sounds. The next morning, I drove out to the shop for the first time in weeks. The familiar smell of sawdust and oil wrapped around me like a blanket. My old sign, Henson & Son Restoration, was still hanging above the door, faded but stubbornly intact. I ran my hand along the wooden counter, remembering when David's small fingers used to line up bolts by size while I worked. "Can I help you?" a voice said from behind me. I turned. It was a young man, maybe 25, holding a clipboard. "You, Arthur Henson." "Depends who's asking," I said. He smiled nervously. "Name's Daniel. I just bought the place from the bank auction. I heard what happened online. Sir, I don't mean to intrude, but I'd be honored if you'd show me how this shop used to run." I studied him for a moment. His hands were rough nails chipped. A worker's hands. "You know how to build?" "Not yet," he said, grinning. "But I want to learn." Something in me softened. "Then you're already halfway there." Over the next hour, I walked him through the layout, the tool racks, the ventilation, the old generator that needed coaxing to start. He took notes like a student, wide-eyed and eager. When he left, I stayed behind. The light through the dusty windows turned the air gold. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel bitterness walking through that space. It wasn't my loss anymore. It was his beginning. That afternoon, Ellen called. "Arthur, you should know something before it hits the news." I braced myself. What now? Melissa's company filed for bankruptcy. She's trying to claim mental distress from public backlash, I sighed. She's not wrong about the distress part. She's also trying to frame it as a feminist issue, saying she was vilified for being a working mother. I chuckled without humor. A working mother who staged her husband's humiliation for clicks. That's one way to rebrand cruelty. Ellen paused. "Arthur, they're sinking fast. But you've won. Every court, every article, every headline, it's over. You don't have to respond to anything else." "I wasn't planning to," I said. But later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what winning really meant. Justice was satisfying, sure. But it didn't erase what had been lost, the trust, the years, the family dinners that used to fill my house with laughter. Around 2 a.m., I sat at my desk and started writing. Not a statement, not a legal letter, just a message. "David, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you're too angry, or maybe you're finally realizing what all this cost you. I'm not writing to forgive you, and I'm not writing to accuse you. I just want you to know that despite everything, you were loved. That was your biggest blind spot. You thought love was currency. It's not. It's a choice one you stop making. I hope someday you find the courage to start choosing it again. Dad. I didn't send it. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and tucked it inside the old wrench drawer in my workbench. It felt right for it to stay there between the tools that built our bond and the silence that broke it. A week later, Ellen called again. Arthur, there's something you should see. I'm emailing it now. It was a YouTube link. I clicked it. The title read, Our Mistake, the Truth About Beggar, Dad. David sat alone in front of a plain gray wall, no fancy lighting, no sponsor banners. He looked tired, older than his years. This isn't about excuses, he began. It's about truth. My wife and I made a choice to use my father's image and pain for entertainment. We thought we could control the narrative. We couldn't. We hurt him. We hurt our kids, and we hurt a lot of people who believed in us. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to own what we did. He paused, voice cracking slightly. My dad once told me that money only shows you who you already were. Turns out he was right. I was selfish. I still am, maybe. But I'm trying to be better. The video ended with a simple line of text. I'm sorry. It had only been up for a few hours, but the comments were already pouring in. Finally, accountability. Took him long enough. At least he's trying. I closed the tab. I didn't need to see more. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward my son. Just a quiet sadness, and maybe deep beneath it, a small flicker of relief. Because for once, he was the one facing the mirror. The next morning, Frank stopped by with his usual cup of coffee. Saw the video, he said. You gonna respond? I shook my head. No. The story doesn't need another chapter. He nodded slowly. You ever think you'll talk to him again? Maybe someday, I said. But forgiveness isn't a door you open for someone else. It's one you unlock for yourself when you're ready to walk through it. Frank smiled. You sound like a man at peace. I looked out the window. The sun was climbing higher, spilling warm light across the yard. Maybe I am, I said. Or maybe I'm just done fighting ghosts. That night, as I locked up the house, I passed by the mirror in the hallway. For the first time in years, I didn't see an old man who'd been humiliated. I saw a man who'd survived it and rebuilt himself from the wreckage. They'd called me a beggar. But beggars don't rebuild. They endure. They outlast. They rise. And sometimes, when the world isn't looking, they find peace not in victory, but in the quiet after. The morning after David's video dropped, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop. At first, I ignored it. I didn't need to see another wave of sympathy or anger from strangers who thought they knew me. But when Ellen called for the third time, I finally answered. Arthur, she said, her voice unusually bright, you might want to turn on the news. I flicked on the TV. A morning anchor was talking about David's apology video, how it had gone viral again this time, for all the right reasons. The headline running across the bottom of the screen read, The Internet Learns to Forgive, Viral Family Makes Amends. Ellen sighed. It's strange, isn't it? Same people who tore him apart last month are now calling him brave. People love a redemption story, I said quietly. Are you angry? No, I said. I'm tired. That day, I didn't check social media. I went for a drive instead. The desert was calm, endless in its silence. Somewhere between Tucson and Sierra Vista, I pulled over at an old roadside diner. I used to come here with my wife Helen back when the kids were little. She'd always order the peach pie. I sat at our old booth, ordered coffee and pie, and just listened to the hum of the jukebox. When the waitress refilled my cup, she smiled at me. Aren't you that man from the videos? I braced myself. The one with the sun, she said softly. You handled it with grace. My mom went through something similar. She said watching you gave her strength. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and said, tell her thank you. When I got back home, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in my son's handwriting. For a long moment, I thought about throwing it away. But something stopped me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dad, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted to tell you that I finally understand what you meant when you said dignity isn't a gift, it's a practice. I've started therapy. The kids are seeing a counselor too. Melissa moved out. I'm trying to be a better father, even if I failed as a son. David. I sat there with the letter in my hands, the words blurring in my eyes. There was no manipulation in it, no guilt-tripping, just something rare honesty. That night I called Ellen. What happens when anger runs out? I asked. She chuckled softly. You live? Her answer stuck with me. A few days later, I met with Jake at a small cafe downtown. He'd driven down from Flagstaff to see me. When he walked in, he looked the same as the day I met him. Camera bag slung over his shoulder, sharp eyes, restless energy. Arthur, he said, shaking my hand, you won. How does it feel? Like finishing a marathon barefoot, I said. He laughed. Fair enough. You should know something, though. Your story's being taught in some media ethics classes now. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, they're calling it the dignity effect. How truth can outlast algorithms. Wild, huh? I smiled faintly. If it makes one person think twice before exploiting someone, it's worth it. Jake leaned forward. What about you? What's next? I rebuild, I said. Not the old life, but something quieter. Maybe teach kids how to work with their hands again. Tools don't lie to you. They only do what you tell them to. Jake grinned. You're still poetic, old man. Poetic, I said. Nah, just practical. When I got home that evening, I found 2 messages waiting on my answering machine. The first was from Frank Art. The fellas from the veterans group are asking if you'll come talk next week. Not about revenge, about resilience. Think about it. The second was from a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Mr. Henson, this is Ruth Delgado from Channel 9. We'd like to feature you in a piece about elder empowerment. Please call back if you're interested. I didn't return either call, not yet. Instead, I walked out to the porch with a glass of iced tea and watched the sun sink behind the mountains. The air smelled like rain and dust. Somewhere in the distance, kids were laughing, neighbors' kids, maybe playing tag before dinner. The sound hit me like a memory. There was a time when that laughter came from inside my own home. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and whispered into the evening, maybe again someday. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Melissa. Short, hesitant. Arthur, I don't expect you to answer. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I was selfish and cruel, and you didn't deserve what we did. If you ever decide you can forgive me, I'll be grateful. If not, I understand. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Melissa, I hope you become someone your children can be proud of. That'll be apology enough. Arthur. I hit send and closed the laptop. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim or a teacher. Just a man who'd finally said enough. That weekend, I drove to see Frank and the veterans group after all. They'd set up folding chairs outside a community center. When I walked up, Frank clapped me on the shoulder. Didn't think you'd come? Neither did I said. He introduced me to the group. This is Arthur Henson, the guy who showed the world what quiet strength looks like. I cleared my throat. I didn't show anyone anything I said. I just stopped letting people take what didn't belong to them. Someone in the back raised a hand. How'd you know when to stop forgiving? I thought about that for a moment. When forgiveness started costing me more than the mistake itself. The group nodded quietly. Someone whispered, "That's truth." Afterward, a woman about my age came up to me. "You know," she said, "you remind me of my husband. He used to say dignity's the only revenge that doesn't rot the soul." I smiled. "He was a wise man." She nodded. "He was? You are too." That night driving home, I realized something simple: revenge wasn't the opposite of forgiveness. Peace was. And peace took work. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically. I stood there a while, watching moths dance around the bulb. Inside, everything was quiet. My world was small again, but it finally felt like mine. Tomorrow, I'd call the Veterans Center back and volunteer. Maybe I'd even teach that young guy, Daniel, how to restore old tools. Maybe I'd build something new out of everything that had been broken. Because that's what you do when life humbles you. You don't stay broken. You get up, brush off the dust, and build again piece by piece, day by day, until even the scars start to look like craftsmanship. The invitation came in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name, typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single page on letterhead from a company I didn't recognize, Golden Path Media Group. "Mr. Henson, we are producing a documentary titled The Cost of Dignity, exploring the aftermath of your story and its impact on modern family dynamics. We'd be honored if you would share your perspective." I almost laughed. The world had moved on, and now they wanted to turn my pain into another round of entertainment. But something about the phrasing caught me: the aftermath of your story. They didn't want the scandal. They wanted the lesson. I sat with it for a few days, unsure. Then one morning, while sweeping the porch, I saw Daniel walking by the young man who'd bought my old shop. He waved. "Hey, Mr. Henson, that video you were in, it's still helping people. My mom made me watch it when I thought I'd never get my life together." I leaned on the broom. "You get your life together," he grinned. "Working on it. Guess we all are." After he left, I went inside, sat at my desk, and dialed the number on the letter. A woman named Lydia answered. "Mr. Henson, thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you'd respond." "I'm not sure why I did," I said. "Because stories like yours don't just fade," she said softly. "They echo." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in front of a camera again. This time, no harsh lights, no scripts, no surprises. The set was simple: a chair, a wooden table, a single mug of coffee. The producer asked Arthur if you could tell your younger self one thing. What would it be? I thought for a moment. That it's okay to say no to people you love. That love without respect is just debt. She nodded quietly. "What about forgiveness?" "That's the hardest part," I said, "not because it's undeserved, but because it's not always necessary. Some things don't need forgiving. They just need finishing." When the camera stopped rolling, Lydia approached me. "Arthur, that was powerful. You speak like someone who's done more thinking than most people do in a lifetime." I smiled. Pain gives you plenty of time to think. The documentary aired 3 months later. I didn't plan to watch it, but Frank convinced me. He came over with 2 beers, sat on my couch, and said, "You're going to want to see this." The opening shot was me in the workshop turning a wrench in slow motion, sunlight streaming through the window. My voice came over the footage. They called me a beggar. But beggars don't ask for pity. They ask for a chance. Sometimes that's all dignity is: a chance to stand back up. The segment cut to interviews people from all over the country. An elderly woman in Florida, a single father in Michigan, a daughter estranged from her mother. All of them talked about how the story made them set boundaries, speak up, or walk away from toxic love. Then came a surprise, a clip of David. He looked healthier, calmer. Sitting in what looked like a counselor's office, he said, "For a long time I thought control was love. I wanted to fix how people saw me. I didn't realize the only thing broken was me." My stomach tightened, but I didn't turn away. "I don't know if my father will ever forgive me," he continued, "but he taught me something I'll never forget. Shame only sticks if you stop telling the truth." When the credits rolled, Frank exhaled. "Damn," he said. "That's a full circle if I ever saw one." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Took him long enough." The next morning, I woke up to a dozen voicemails, half from reporters, half from strangers, thanking me. But one message stopped me cold. "Hi, Grandpa, it's Lily. Mom said you probably wouldn't pick up, but I just wanted to tell you I saw the movie. You looked so strong. I miss you. Can I come visit?" My throat tightened. I hadn't heard her voice since the chaos began. "Yes," I whispered to the empty room. "Any time." A week later, a car pulled into my driveway. Lily stepped out taller now, her hair longer, her face older but softer. She smiled nervously. "Hi, Grandpa." I stepped forward, unsure if a hug was welcome, but she didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around me. "I'm sorry for everything," she whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said, my voice rough. "Mom said you might think that she said pulling back, but I feel like I should say it anyway." We spent the afternoon on the porch, talking about school, her friends, her plans for college. She asked if I was still angry. "No," I said. "Anger's a young man's game. I'm too old for it now." She smiled. "Mom says you've always been stubborn." She's not wrong. When she left, I walked her to the car. Before she got in, she said, "You know, Grandpa, people online call you a hero." I laughed. Heroes save people. I just stopped letting mine hurt me. She smiled. That counts. After she drove away, I sat on the porch long after sunset. The air smelled like mesquite and rain. I thought about how the whole thing had started with a single cruel moment, a video meant to humiliate me. And now somehow, it had turned into something else. Something that mattered. Later that night, I checked my email and saw a message from Lydia. Arthur, the documentary, hit 1 million views in 2 days. But more than that, it's inspiring community centers and senior groups to host workshops about financial and emotional abuse. You didn't just tell your story. You started a movement. I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. You started a movement. Funny thing about movements, they usually start when someone finally stands still and says, "Enough." Before I went to bed, I looked around my quiet little house. The framed photos on the wall no longer looked like ghosts. They looked like lessons. I turned off the light, sat on the edge of my bed, and whispered to myself, maybe I didn't lose a family. Maybe I just helped build a new one. Outside, the night hummed with life, the distant rumble of a passing train, the soft croak of desert frogs after the rain. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams. I woke up before sunrise, the way I used to, when I still ran the shop. Old habits don't die, they just quiet down for a while, waiting for you to need them again. The house was still the air cool enough that the coffee steam curled against the window. I sat at the kitchen table looking at the morning light pushing through the blinds and thought, funny thing about peace, it doesn't arrive with applause. It just shows up one morning unannounced. The world had moved on. The documentary had come and gone. People online had turned their attention to newer scandals, fresher outrage. But here in my small corner of Arizona, the quiet had returned like an old friend. I didn't mind it. Quiet is where truth finally breathes. Around 9, the phone rang. It was David. "Hey, Dad," he said softly. For a second I said nothing, just listened to his breathing. It sounded steady, different. "Morning, son," I said finally. I wanted to thank you, he said, for letting Lily visit. She came home, lighter. Said you made her feel safe again. She's a good kid, I said. Smart kind. She got that from your mother. There was a pause on the line. Then he said, Dad, I'm sober now. 3 months. Therapy's been hell, but it's working. I'm trying. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. That's good, David. I'm proud of you for doing the work. I don't expect anything from you, he said. Not forgiveness, not another chance. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be a man my kids don't have to heal from. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close. That's all I ever wanted for you, I said quietly. We talked a few minutes more. About Lily's art classes, about Tyler joining the soccer team, about simple things that didn't need fixing. When he hung up, I sat there a while, letting the silence settle again. Later that morning, Frank dropped by with a box of tools. Found these cleaning my garage, he said. Figured you'd want 'em. I looked through the box. Rusty wrenches, old clamps, a few things I'd lent him years ago. You could have kept them, I said. He shrugged. You taught me something, Art. Fixing things doesn't always mean keeping them. Sometimes it's just making sure they work for whoever needs them next. I chuckled. You sound wiser than me these days. Don't get used to it, he said, grinning. After he left, I went out to the backyard. The air smelled like creosote and sun. The old lemon tree was heavy with fruit, bending the branches low. I picked a few and thought of Helen, how she'd squeeze the juice into her tea, humming that old Sinatra tune under her breath. For the first time in years, remembering her didn't hurt. It just felt like warmth. That afternoon, I drove into town. Daniel's shop, the one that used to be mine, was busy. The sound of hammers, drills, laughter. He spotted me through the window and waved. Mr. Henson, come check this out. Inside the place was spotless. Tools hung neatly, floor swept clean. He showed me an old truck he'd been restoring for a customer. Almost done, he said proudly. Used your blueprint for the suspension system. You're doing good work, I said. Better than I ever did. He shook his head. I wouldn't know how if you hadn't shown me. As I walked out, I glanced back at the sign above the door. Henson and Son Restoration. Daniel had kept the name. My throat tightened, but in a good way. Maybe legacies don't end, they just change hands. That evening, I met Ellen for dinner. She looked different without her usual business armor, just jeans and a simple blouse, her hair tied back. So she said, sipping her wine, you finally at peace with all this, I think so, I said. Or maybe I just ran out of reasons not to be. She smiled. You know, Arthur, you did more than win a case. You taught people what quiet strength looks like. I shrugged. All I did was survive. That's exactly what makes it powerful, she said. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more survivors who aren't afraid to tell the truth. We toasted to that. When I got home, the sun was setting behind the hills, throwing a golden glow across the porch. I sat down with my coffee and watched the sky shift colors. Somewhere a coyote howled. Somewhere else a child laughed. The world kept turning indifferent and beautiful. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the betrayal, the courtroom battles, the viral chaos, the strange kind of justice that came afterward. And I realized it had all led me here to stillness. I didn't need to win anymore. I didn't need to be right. I just needed to live with my own reflection and not flinch. A few days later, I got an email from Lydia, the documentary producer. Arthur, the film is being nominated for an award in New York. We'd love for you to attend. But even if you can't know this, your story helped change laws in 2 states regarding elder financial abuse. You made a real difference. I smiled at the screen. I wasn't going to New York. I'd had enough cameras for one lifetime. but knowing something good came from the wreckage, that was enough. As night settled in, I turned off the lights and sat on the porch one last time before bed. The stars were endless, scattered across the black like broken glass that somehow looked beautiful in the dark. I took a deep breath and said aloud to no one and everyone, "They called me a beggar." I just smiled. And maybe that's what saved me. Because in the end, dignity wasn't something they could steal. It was something I'd built piece by piece every time I chose silence over rage, truth over spectacle, peace over pity. And for anyone out there still fighting their own kind of storm, I'd say this: don't let them tell you who you are. Don't let their shame become your burden. Tell your story. Let the truth do what revenge never could. If this story reminded you of something you've lived through, share it. Leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. You're not alone, none of us are. The screen fades to black and my voice lingers. Because sometimes the loudest kind of revenge is simply living well.